Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the RocaNews Show. Today is Wednesday, October 22nd. We got a lot of news, but first, we are your hosts. I'm Max Frost.
And I'm Max Towey.
And back there,
I'm Rob.
With the collar daddy hat on.
I love it.
So, Max, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about a lot today. We're going to start off with some news because guess what? We are, despite popular belief, a news show. And so we are going to get into a brand new deal, a huge deal between US and Argentina. We're going to talk about a fascinating new letter that over 1,000 public figures have signed. And then we're going to get into some fun stuff like the debate that for all the income inequality opponents aren't talking about, that we are curious as to why they're not talking about it.
And now that letter you mentioned, 1,000 people signed it, including Steve Bannon, Will.i.am, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle. That's the first time you've ever seen those four names on the list.
I could not believe it. Yeah, it shows. I mean, if you don't believe we're living in strange times, Will.i.am, Steve Bannon, Prince Harry, Meghan Markle just signed the same letter, and it's about AI. And actually, believe it or not, I think some people are going to find it super based.
So we'll get there, but first, we want to kick it off. We want to talk to you. So there is a new deal. Argentina, the US. Trump is saying, make Argentina great again. He actually said this, no irony. He's allowing the US to essentially give $20 billion to Argentina. Now, you've probably seen a lot of headlines about this. We wrote a story kind of diving into what actually happened here. So now this is interesting. For one thing, if you've been paying attention to anything the Trump officials have been saying for a while, they view Milei in Argentina as not just any leader. They view him as a linchpin to the strategy for the Western Hemisphere. Now, Milei was elected 2 years ago in November 2023. Libertarian. His whole idea was we're going to gut the government of Argentina. They are his saying was that they are responsible for the economic crisis that has plagued that country. You had 100%, 200% inflation, high poverty, just a declining economy in every way. Milei was elected, and when he was elected, he kept saying this: "No hay plata." Am I saying that right?
No hay plata.
No hay plata. There's no money. And now there really is no money, and Argentina is coming to the U.S. So in essence, what happened here, Milei for the last 2 years, he's been doing all these things to deregulate the economy, to cut government spending, to cut subsidies, to cut, you name it, in the name of deregulating Argentina's economy, allowing it to grow again after years of stagnation, and mainly bringing down inflation, which he says is the number one enemy, which, again, it's been at over 100% in Argentina for a while. So let's go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to ask, so for people with little context, kind of, why is this causing outrage?
The money?
Yeah.
The U.S. giving Argentina $20 billion? Because why wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
For context, $20 billion is 3 times what the U.S. gave Israel last year.
Wow.
It's the same as the U.S. gave Ukraine.
Wow.
So just to put that in context, so $20 billion, this isn't chump change. And the U.S., that's $20 billion directly from the U.S. government. The U.S. is also having private companies, banks, whoever, put up an additional $20 billion. So now the question is, why are they doing this? And what does this look like? So part of Argentina's whole reforms, part of this has been devaluing the Argentine currency, the peso. And the way they've been doing that is within a band where they essentially will sell. The Argentine treasury has all these dollars. They'll buy and sell dollars to essentially keep the peso in a certain level, right? It's all supply and demand. So what happened though, in September, Milei's party was crushed in Buenos Aires elections. Buenos Aires, the capital, by far the largest city in Argentina. Milei's party was crushed and investors panicked. Because they're looking at this and they're like, well, we've been investing in Argentina thinking Milei is going to get his stuff through and they're going to liberalize the economy and grow the economy. And then they see this go on and they're like, oh shit, this actually isn't going to happen, right? We're actually in trouble. So they started selling Argentine assets, which meant the Argentine peso plummeted in value. So Argentina needed to sell its reserves to prop it up. It's dollars. You sell the dollar to prop up the local currency, but it started to run out of money. This is where the U.S. came in, essentially said, here's $20 billion. We're going to get you another $20 billion. And that $40 billion should be enough to convince investors Argentina's assets and currency are safe. Because what they're worried about is the currency is going to go to zero, right? It's going to lose all its value. Everything they have in Argentinian currency will become worthless. So the goal here is the U.S. is trying to prop up Milei. And this weekend, they have elections in Argentina. It's midterm elections. So they wanted Milei to get support before these midterm elections this weekend.
Wow. I must say, I've been totally out of the loop on Argentinian politics, although I did see a concert that Javier Milei performed at recently. Did you see this?
No.
Rob, can you pull it up if you got a chance? This will be a quick clip. So while he's negotiating deals with President Trump and the White House, he's also rocking out on stage, and he's a big heavy metal fan. And so it goes to show there's another side of him. This reminds me when Anthony Blinken, our former Secretary of State, was rocking out. You never hear. Yeah, pull this up, Rob. Let's get eyes on this.
What was Anthony Blinken rocking out to?
I can't even remember, but he can low key shred it. All right, here we go. All right, turn on that volume. All right, skip ahead just so we don't get. And then we're. That's pretty good.
It's kind of hilarious that like they're not like booing. Can you imagine if Trump came out to a rock concert here? It's a huge venue.
I thought it was Bad Bunny. My uncle thought it was Bad Bunny. I sent a clip to him.
Your uncle thought that was Bad Bunny?
I'm kidding. I still don't even know if he's heard that news yet. We're all bracing for that. Anyway, so that's all I had to contribute to this.
So before or after taking the stage to do that performance, Milei locked down this deal, $20 billion. The question is, do the Argentinians control us?
I think they do. And I'm clearly bought and paid for it because I was like, why would anyone have an issue with 20 bill? It's a 20 bill. Come on, dude, chill out.
It's also worth noting that there's one other thing here that's interesting. Mm-hmm. So right now, China's been boycotting U.S. agricultural products. Mm-hmm. It's a major problem for American farmers, right? Argentina is one of our biggest competitors in agricultural products, beef, soy, all this kind of stuff, right? The day that the U.S. signed this deal, Argentina and Milei took off an export tax, making it easier for Argentinians to export their stuff abroad. That same day, China struck a deal to buy Argentinian grain exports. So American farmers are pissed off about this because we're saying, okay, because of this deal we struck, they're taking off this export tax. Now China's buying Argentinian goods instead of buying American goods. Where is the MAGA in that? And that is the interesting question to me here. I mean, I don't understand how this hasn't gotten more flack from people who are all about, keeping the money in America and this and that. I mean, to me, if you are a hardcore MAGA person, you look at this, it's $20 billion going to Argentina for what? Because, and also keep in mind, Milei is an ardent libertarian, right? He's a libertarian to his core. Well, now he's coming to us for a bailout. I don't think it's whether you're a libertarian, whether you're a MAGA, it seems like there's a lot to be pissed off.
I know why they're not raising hell. Argentina controls the media, dude. I'm telling you, I'm actually gonna put together a conspiracy between Messi coming to Miami and this actually getting no flag.
Who else is there? Are there any other Argentinians who are?
I don't know. We'll work on the list.
Yeah,
we're gonna get back to you on that list. I mean, they do have beautiful people. They always top those lists of like world's most beautiful people. I feel like they're always up there.
They're beautiful people.
They sound like Trump. They've got beautiful people. Well, Frost, that's super interesting. It's one of those stories that I think, some people, including, myself and some of those who are more ignorant toward world affairs, that at first you're kind of like, what's going on here? But you think about it, like this is significant. And interesting. And I do wonder what the pushback will be long term. And also it's notable that Elon Musk was a huge supporter of Milei's and remains that way. So I just think that's kind of interesting.
I believe Milei was there for Elon's cringiest moment ever, right?
The chainsaw.
The chainsaw.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he's a big proponent of Milei and deregulation. So anyways, super interesting on that. Now, here's the story we teased at the beginning. And for all of you wondering if we live in strange times, listen to this. Will.i.am, Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and Steve Bannon just signed the same letter. Now, what does that letter support? Is it to get rid of daylight saving time? Is it to ban cowboy fans from public transport? What is it? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's about super intelligent AI. They're calling for a ban on the development of super intelligent artificial intelligence. And now, by the way, this is notable. And also, you've talked about this before, but You have AI, and then you have AGI, artificial general intelligence, where it can sort of think for itself. And then you have artificial think like a human. Super intelligence is way beyond what a human can understand. So those are sort of the three big stages. ASI. And so they're saying, hold on, we're calling for a prohibition on the development of super intelligence. And not just these people have signed it, but also Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple. You had Richard Branson. You also had Geoffrey Hinton, who's known as the godfather of AI. He's a British-Canadian technologist. He worked at Google from 2013 to 2023, and he resigned that year just so he could warn against the existential risks of AI, which is hilarious. And you're like, by the way, can I go and quit the job just so I can tell you? It's like leaving Roca. Like, I need to leave here. And by the way, for us, it's going to be to warn against upstart, nonpartisan news companies in the media. And that's exactly what Geoffrey Hinton's done. He's called it a major, major risk. He says everyone who develops this and has touched this knows that it could potentially lead to the extinction of our species. So long story short, people are signing this letter for different reasons. Some of them are over creative concerns. Some are over existential concerns. And I've noticed anecdotally, we see our comments, we see our DMs, we see our inboxes, we have people in our audience from all over the political spectrum. It does feel like the public and the educated slice of the population have really turned against AI.
One thing that's interesting, this comes as Eliezer Yudkowsky is on like a full-blown press tour. Now, do you know who he is? Have you read any of his stuff?
No,
or heard him?
never.
Okay. He was an AI researcher, and he wrote this book, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, I think is the name of it. And it's about, he says there's a 99% probability that if we build super intelligence, the human race goes extinct. And I've listened to a few podcasts with him. The first one I listened to, he was interviewed by Sam Harris, and I found it pretty persuasive. Then he went on Ezra Klein's podcast. I listened to that, and I found it much less so. I found him to be actually totally, he scoffed at questions like, how could you not think this? Like that whole thing, which obviously is never a good way to win people over to your argument. But he believes, and others in his camp, he's kind of leading. Geoffrey Hinton for a while was like the biggest name, and kind of warning about this. And now it's this Eliezer Yudkowsky. And he's saying the same thing. Essentially what they say is this will kill everybody. And the question is, how does it kill everybody? Which he doesn't really talk about in the podcast. He doesn't go into the actual way, but he gives metaphors, and he says, when we build a skyscraper, we're not trying to kill all the ants, but we do. And his theory essentially is that, AI doesn't need to be malicious. It doesn't need to be whatever. But when it's super intelligent, and then it develops its own thing. Another thing that he says is that, you think about us right now versus humans 50,000 years. If you think about the way AI is going to develop, you think about humans 50,000 years ago versus us today. 50,000 years ago, early humans cared about like one thing, which was reproducing, right? That's natural selection. That's all it was. You look at us today, and our motivations, our interests, our everything are unrecognizable. We're the same species, we're the same whatever. However, all of our interests, everything we do is totally different. And he's saying AI can go the same way. So a human 50,000 years ago, if put in our head today, wouldn't understand a thing that's going on. They just wouldn't be able to make sense of it. And he says that's where AI is going, where it's going to be, this technology is going to be so beyond what we can conceive of. It's going to be doing things that even if we program it, like we are programmed by natural selection to build, to be like cavemen, right? To go around and to reproduce and whatever. Yet we've pivoted so far from that. And he's saying the same thing essentially with artificial super intelligence. It's going to get so far beyond us that even if we program it, even if we say serve humanity and do this and that, there's no way of actually containing it. And that's what these people are worried about too.
I thought you were going to go and make the point that we haven't changed and that we're just still about reproducing. And it's kind of like the social network premise of, Mark Zuckerberg built this, giant social media company, but he really just wanted the girl, which of course is factually untrue. But that's an outstanding point. I keep on the creative. It feels like there are many reasons why people oppose AI. Some people are worried about job displacement. Some are worried about the existential concerns of, it exterminating the human race. And then some are worried about like its dehumanizing effects. And so a lot of creatives will go after it. And in your recent piece on Sora 2, the technology or the app no one asked for, you quoted Robin Williams' daughter, Zelda, in the piece. And she had this great thing. And I've heard it over and over again, that where basically they talk about at first AI was so intimidating, and now they're like, hold on, AI just this regurgitating machine. It takes everything that's in circulation, it spits it out. And I've heard some people do kind of the head blunt take of, well, aren't humans that? Don't all your favorite authors and artists and filmmakers, don't they just derive their ideas from others and maybe tweak a couple things? But regardless of whether that's true or not, more like informal AIs with emotion and whatnot, and whether we just regurgitate, we're interested in what other humans do and like their experiences and this and that. And they're not interested in the regurgitations from a soulless machine. And so I do feel that creative types are like, we don't want to get to the point where it's ASI and they are making high quality movies. We'd much rather stay at the human level, and we don't want to lose everything that makes us feel valuable and makes us feel motivated. And I can't help but think that this letter, and I think it's embodied by who signed it. I mean, again, Glenn Beck signed it. Seeing Susan Rice, the former U.S. National Security Advisor, signed it.
And just to be clear, I believe it's just 31 words. It says this: we call for a prohibition on the development of superintelligence not lifted before there is broad scientific consensus that it will be done safely and controllably and strong public buy-in. That's the statement. So this is not, it's not rocket science here. They're just essentially, the call is, let's stop let's stop pursuing this as aggressively as possible until we have some, but this has happened before. And in fact, I can't remember when it was. I think it was when ChatGPT 4 came out. All these different tech leaders and all these people came together and they put out a similar thing saying, essentially, we need to have a pause in the arms race. And then they just kept doing it. Like they just kept spending. And now the money is so there. And also, I can't remember if you said this or someone else I was talking to. They said, essentially we're in a position now where one of two things happens. Either the financial bubble bursts, the AI bubble bursts, or all the jobs are eliminated.
Oh, I know you said that, and you made the point of like both are kind of concerning.
Then you know who it was? I was talking to Wineset 2 nights ago. Wineset at the point. Shout out our friend Matt Wineset.
Brilliant guy. So quick thing, I just want to go before we go into a couple closing segments, but on AI, which is, we always talk about like part of Roca's mission should be addressing, especially with our original content, the main issues of our age. And we live in a fascinating time. So we talk about mass migration a lot. That's an issue that's, front and center in the West. And we talk about sort of the sort of polarization related issues and how that affects young people and dating and all these different facets and institutional trust and news trust and all this. I think another one we are going to keep coming back to is this AI. I mean, it's hard not to. It's unbelievably important. And just one comment on what you were saying about like the abandonment of sort of being like the monitors and regulators of AI. John Markle, a longtime New York Times tech reporter, grew up in Palo Alto, delivered papers to the future homes of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and Larry Page. So he's a Palo Alto guy, covered this industry forever, interviewed Steve Jobs many times, wrote his obituary for the New York Times, all this. This guy's plugged in as hell. He's interviewed Jensen Huang, he's interviewed Sam Altman, all these people. He made the point that he remembers he covered like the prehistory of AI when it was just getting started. It was more of a theory and academics talked about it and some of the entrepreneurs did, but it was mostly an academic thing. And he remembers when OpenAI started and the culture around it, they legitimately cared about protecting it. They were fearful. They wanted to protect it, but the money just got too tempting. And then rivalries developed and some people tried to cash in. So it's just kind of fascinating how that original group fell apart. And, I think it can be kind of a low IQ thing to keep falling back on the Oppenheimer parallel. And I kind of want to read more about the actual reality of the AI discourses, but you can't help but think of that,
Have you seen any of the stuff that's going on right now about the Claude and Reid Hoffman? And essentially, Anthropic is emerging as kind of like the liberal, AI company versus everything else. Liberal, whatever that means in this context. But they're the more cautious one, allegedly. I mean, the founder of Claude, I believe. Rob, can you pull us up to fact check me? But I'm pretty sure the founder of Claude quit OpenAI or of Anthropic, quit OpenAI and started Anthropic because he was worried about OpenAI's recklessness. And that's kind of been this.
And he's a Brit, right?
Dario Amodei. I thought he was Italian.
Oh, maybe it's just one of the other Claudes.
Okay, yeah. Dario Amodei left OpenAI over disagreements about the direction of the company and a focus on safety. Yeah. So he was OpenAI's vice president of research, and he believed that the way OpenAI was doing it was wrong. So they went.
OpenAI was a nonprofit to start.
Yeah,
still is. It still is a nonprofit technically. They're just
with billions of dollars in profit.
Yeah.
Although
Not profit.
with a big subsidiary that I believe is for profit, and they're they're currently they're changing their structure. It's evolving slowly, but technically it's still a nonprofit.
Yeah, and it's unclear though how that's actually going to go down because they haven't really been able to get around the loopholes. But they're losing, I think, $8 billion every 6 months. At least that was the first 6 months of this year. They lost $8 billion.
It is kind of crazy when you get into nonprofit world how complex and misleading that label can be. But, I will say this, Sam Altman, again, like his net worth is going to explode. I'm sure he's well positioned for, as this boom continues, but it's still, for all of his influence, it's still like he's not even like in the top 500 richest people on the planet.
Well, that's because he has no shares of OpenAI.
So what is his $2 billion from it?
He invested in a whole bunch of stuff.
A bunch of nuclear. I know he's invested in nuclear energy.
I don't think that's what the money's from though. The money, I believe, is from Airbnb.
Oh yeah, when he was at Y Combinator.
When he was at Y Combinator, he was the president of Y Combinator,
Yeah.
so he made a bunch of those investments through Y Combinator, and then subsequently on his own.
Yeah,
and he invested in tons of stuff. But I'm pretty sure he doesn't have a single share. I think part of the way the OpenAI stuff is set up is that he can't own stock in it right now. This is why they have to change it. So they want him to be aligned with the investors or whatever it is.
How is their stock in OpenAI if it's a nonprofit?
Because
I think they have a for-profit subsidiary that actually does most of their business, but it's still the larger structure is a nonprofit. I think if you look it up and type in, it has a OpenAI structure and then for-profit subsidiary or something. But long story short, Sam Altman's cashing in on this. And you're right. Like I remember, I even think in the piece I wrote about his podcast Blitz, like when he was president of of Y Combinator, and if you don't know what that is, it's an incubator. They've created some of the most, some of the biggest companies of the last 25 years. Basically, if you're starting a company and you want an initial check and someone to help guide you, you go to Y Combinator. And he ran it for a while and became super, super connected.
doesn't it just seem so perfect that OpenAI, whose mission is to benefit all humanity, is going to kill all of humanity?
I know,
that just strikes me as dystopian. I got to watch iRobot again. That's a movie I haven't seen in forever.
I never saw it.
You never saw it?
No, I never saw it. But look at this partnership between a nonprofit and a capped for profit arm, and a public benefit corporation. Anyways, it's a weird.
They have to restructure the company, otherwise they don't get all of Microsoft's money. So that's like the main thing.
Wow. Well, so there you go on that. Unless any other thoughts, Frost, but I think it's just. I and again, the piece on, not to go back to this one, it was nothing extraordinary, but I just found it fascinating that Sam Altman, who's extremely smart and extremely power hungry by every account. We famously talked about Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, who listed him as one of the 5 entrepreneurs in history. If you had to do a draft of who he'd
listed him that over a decade ago.
This is when his only exit was it was looped, and it wasn't even that big of a success. They raised like $30 million and he sold it for like 45.
The thing about Sam Altman is he is not an Elon Musk. He is not a Steve Jobs. He's not one of these guys who had like some idea and just like pursued it to like the absolute end. He kind of happened into this AI stuff. Totally. Because he was, again, he became president of Y Combinator because he was so good at the VC game.
Totally.
He understood this stuff better than anybody else. This was his gift. His gift was convincing investors to put money into whatever he was working on and to convince it to put money into what other people were working on or whatever. That's how he made his money, right? It wasn't through like creating some wildly successful company. It was through identifying companies and then making them huge, which is a game,
in
right?
Talent. Like, he's just so connected. And as you point out, like he knew the talent game. And you hear about Elon Musk's management style from everyone credible. He's not a hater. Like he actually didn't build anything. Insane. Like you hear, he's built like best in class companies in some of the most difficult categories independently. It would be a statistical impossibility if he were just lucky for all those to have happened. And he, people talk about like he gets into the engineering weeds. Like when he bought Twitter, he did a deep dive. He was into the minutia of every single aspect of the company, and that's his management style. And Sam Altman's visionary, major capital raiser, huge vision guy, great talent acquirer. But all that's to say, Sam Altman knows that he has a public trust issue, and he's going above and beyond. He's going to Theo Vaughn. He's on even Tucker's show. And he's all over trying to tell people and using his soft voice and kind of building trust by admitting vulnerability at times and how he has some of these fears too, and saying he's not profiting at all. He does all these things. Maybe this is too cynical of a read and probably should remove personal taste more, but all that to say, like he is aware of this. So
he's a powerful guy.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing, the thing about Silicon Valley, right, is you have to have an idea and you have to convince investors to fund it.
Yes.
Like that's how the people who succeed at the highest level there, they are able. A lot of people with the best ideas don't succeed, right? It comes down to people who are able to convince an investor to part with billions of dollars. And Sam Altman is the GOAT at this. And he has been. Before he started OpenAI, he was famous for this. And now it's just, he has taken this and he's made AI his cause. But AI is only one of his many causes. I mean, he's got WorldCoin, which you've also written about, the orb and all this and that, a global database of all our biometrics. He's got the Helion nuclear fusion startup.
Oh yeah.
So it's all this different stuff. This is just the one that he's like struck gold with first, but he's got a bunch of different things. But it all comes down to this: getting investors to put up huge amounts of money to fund your vision, and he convinces them he can do it. So, and then once you have enough money, you can do it. I
remember there's a line from one of the Khosla. That's one of the 10 biggest VCs in the world. They funded some of the biggest companies. And one of their founding partners, Samir Kowal, in a podcast said that when they were like, you invested $50 million into OpenAI when it was an idea and a nonprofit with no path to even making money. Like literally, and he said, oh yeah, it was Sam Altman. There are only 3 people probably on the planet I would do that for. Elon Musk is one. And then he said Sam Altman would be, he said 2 or 3. I don't think he listed the third, but the point is, it's a tiny freaking list. And this was before he had a big exit. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So also another note of news, which you may have seen, this was actually in today's or last night's news, but OpenAI put out a web browser.
Yeah.
So there's that now. You can not just go to ChatGPT. I mean, I guess it's good to have more competition like the web browser space. Everyone uses Chrome and Safari and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's more for OpenAI. So
what do you use if you're like in a hypochondriac mode of like, I have these symptoms? Are you going to ChatGPT, Google still? What is your go-to browser right now?
Dude, the thing that freaks me out about ChatGPT is I feel like then it remembers it. And I know Google remembers it like deep down somewhere else, right? Like, but ChatGPT, it'll reference it. It'll be like, oh, I'm glad to hear you're feeling better. I'm glad to hear you got over that
so
cough,
creepy.
6 weeks ago. But yeah, that's what free. I don't need that.
Yeah, I'm glad you got over your anime addiction. Like you don't want to hear that from a computer.
Yes, anime addiction. That is.
Not the problems plaguing us. We have plenty of those, but I was just curious because I've noticed with some I've noticed too TikTok as a browser people use. I'm not kidding. Like if it's where to eat in this neighborhood or a question about a book, I've seen younger people especially will search on TikTok. Okay, Frost, I'm not going to do a big soapbox thing for the final segment to cover, but I thought you would find it interesting and maybe have some thoughts on it. But I just had this idea where in my head, we like when you think about all the anti-capitalist sentiment, especially among our generation, they're always going after CEO pay. And I am not here to shill for the executives of Fortune 500 companies. If you actually look at their pay compared to the 80s, they were making, on average, Fortune 500 CEOs, a few $100,000 in the 80s. And today, they're making, on average, something like $16 million.
They were making a few $100,000.
Few $100,000 to $1 million was the average salary in the 1980s. Early
for a
1980s.
Fortune 500 CEO. Wow.
Exactly. Wow. So, okay. So now, and by the way, I also did some research, and it went from if you were to say CEO to average worker pay, it went from 50x in 1984. And then it peaked actually in 2000 at 400x, and it's 200x today. Now, I think some cynical people would say, well, they outsourced a lot more. So like the people they still employ, this is all US. So the people they outsourced. So I could see that being an interesting case. But this is all a long-winded preface just to make this point. Why don't we talk more about how much entertainers get paid? If you look at NBA salaries today, the average NBA player is making around $11 million a year. If you combine endorsements, LeBron would have been paid the second or third highest paid executive among Fortune 500 companies last year.
Wow.
Steph Curry's right up there. Even Russell Westbrook would have been like the 15th highest paid CEO. And you look at this across categories, and for whatever reason, nobody's ever doing, and this is what, to shoot 40% from the field, they're getting tens of millions of dollars. The NBA's losing ratings. Its players are making a fortune. Ticket prices have gone through the roof. And I just don't get why entertainers don't get more scrutiny for how much money they get paid. Nobody's doing that for the Eras Tour. I mean, I know Taylor Swift, that would be a great marriage. Taylor Swift got a bunch of positive headlines for dumping cash on her stagehands after a successful leg. And she seemed like a decent boss, but nobody's ever doing analyses of what to sing about,
Yeah, but that's because people like it.
Well, if you're talking about how much money people deserve with how much value they create, I'm sorry. I don't think that freaking Shea Gilgeous-Alexander deserves whatever, $45 million.
Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who, when we were in Canada, we drove past his high school.
What?
They had a giant,
really?
just a random high school, giant home of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander.
That's hilarious.
Hamilton, Ontario. But because you get a smile on your face when you go to a concert.
But
you watch
that's
Taylor Swift sing. You
stupid,
don't get a smile on your face when you get your healthcare claim declined by Brian Thompson. No offense, but so
That's actually a good line.
This
That's a
actually
good
brings
line.
back to something here that, and that's no. I shouldn't say Brian Thompson. I'm not a Luigi stan.
By the way, how about the Lady Boy? We'll get to that once it's confirmed. But yes.
Okay, so you sent me this chart, Rob. I'm going to quiz you here. What percent of, and all listeners, think about this. This is from Pew. What percent of Americans were classified as middle income or middle class in 1971?
To say 71%.
And what do you think it is today?
65.
The number, it went from 61 to 51%.
Wow.
So that reflects the shrinking middle class. However, this is what really struck me as interesting. The share of people classified as upper income went from 11% to 19%, which means if you look at those two stats together, it goes to from 72% as middle or upper to 70%. It's pretty remarkable. And then the share with lower income went from 27 to 30. I don't know how you make sense of this. Now, you could just say the data is wrong. I don't really believe that. I think the data is right. I think that something has changed, though, in terms of maybe it's just because the costs of core, I would say three core things have gone up so much. Middle income no longer means middle class. Yeah. And I'd say those three things are education, healthcare, housing. Pretty much everything else has become more affordable. If you look at the cost of, I don't want to say everything else, but you look at the cost, certainly the things that you buy, air travel, like all this stuff has become much more affordable. Those three things, which really determine your quality of life in many ways, are you able to pay for your kids' education, your own education? Are you able to pay for medical care and a house? So that's my take, but what do you guys think?
I have a couple initial thoughts.
I'll boil the question down to this. How is it possible that it's about the same exact share of Americans who are middle or upper income today as in 1971, yet we are so much more pessimistic and feel so much worse about our situation?
Okay, so I think a couple things. To add to this, by the way, a stat that surprised me recently, I don't have this off the top of my head, but it's the share of wealth the top 1% and even 0.1% owns now compared to 1980s. Again, I'm not going to quote it now. Maybe I'll come back tomorrow. But I remember I thought it would be like much, much, much higher now. It's not that much higher.
Really?
So there are a couple percentages. It is higher, but like minor. I want to say by a small margin. I think there are some eye-popping stats about like there are a lot of millionaires in the country now. Like a stat that's crazy is I think there are 1 million millionaires in New York. Does that sound about right? Maybe it's more.
In New York.
I think Rob, can you look up how many millionaires there are in New York? That might be a little high. I could totally be butchering this.
In the city or the
state? Yeah, just do NYC. Let's see. Okay, that's wrong.
385,000.
400,000 millionaires. So that's still a lot of millionaires. So $1 million was high and wrong. So
That's 5%. That's 5% of the population. New York City is a millionaire.
I know. It's crazy, but you have a lot of millionaires. My thing on that is, I think if you the stat that I think everyone feels is how many incomes or what factor of incomes is required to buy a house. You know, where now it's much, much higher than it was. And if people visualize the American dream and still a nice house in the suburbs and 2 cars and enough to, you know, take care of a couple kids. And I think that they would look at childcare costs, which again, I don't know how accurate that is. I don't know how much childcare costs have gone up, but the housing costs have gone up substantially.
One of the differences with childcare costs is now both parents work.
Yeah.
So now you need childcare. I mean, childcare wasn't much of a thing 50 years ago because not both parents didn't work typically.
Yeah.
So, but that gets into a whole bigger thing, right? And if you start talking about that, then you get onto really thin ice and you'll get all the Redditors pissed at you. But dude, I made the mistake of looking at the subreddit last night and seeing the, what was someone pissed about, dude? I can't even remember. Everything, dude. You go on there, but it was something we said on the show and I can't remember what it was. No need to get into it, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that it is true. If you look at it in a bubble and it's like, oh, what happened to childcare costs? Well, there's multiple layers to that. There's multiple layers to all this stuff. Universities, way more people go to school now than they used to, right? So it's more demand on the universities. It pushes that up. It changes, but I don't know. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, just like I think there's kind of 2 factors. One, like I don't know, Steven Pinker a while ago had this whole thing about like the world is actually better than we think, and I do think perceptions are skewing more negative than reality. But I did some math today because Sagar and Jetty of Breaking Points tweeted something out that median healthcare costs for 2-family household is now at like $27,000 a year. I looked at median income, which is $83,000 a year. Median rent is $17K a year, and then if you're paying a mortgage, median is $30K a year. After taxes, that leaves you with truly no disposable income if you're a regular person who wants healthcare and housing.
Huh.
So the way which we measure like middle class, if it's based on income and not factoring in expenses, we could argue that there is no middle class.
I'm trying to think about. So wait, what's that? I saw this article. The Wall Street Journal, I think, had the analysis. Can you pull this up? Can you see if you can find it online?
And while we're talking about it, I do think you're right. Like Steven Pinker's thesis in Enlightenment Now and generally about the world's gotten better, it's safer, people live longer, infant mortality rates are lower, all these different objective metrics, we're better off. I do think that we need to acknowledge some of that more often. People die less frequently in violent deaths, all of that. But at the same time, I think that, and he's argued it's not linear. We interviewed him and he told us that. He made that case when we were talking about some backsliding, but I think people are worried that some of these backslides are going to be long-term. But anyways.
Real quick, not to just because we have this here.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the 27,000, Rob, is employer plus worker contribution.
Okay.
Because there's hover your mouse over that and see if does it give you a number if you hover.
But it looks like 7,000 per worker contribution.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Right?
So essentially this this is the real trend here is we saw like our own Roca healthcare, the cost jumped like hugely this year. And I subsequently read an article that says the biggest 1-year jump for employer, whatever, or just for, I guess, private healthcare ever or something like that.
Those costs do get passed on though downstream.
Well, the costs get passed on. I mean, right. It's like, just think about it this way. If insurance, say just hypothetically, insurance costs $1,000 per employee, the company keeps it, the company covers 90%, and then it jumps up to $2,000.
Yeah.
Everyone gets screwed except the insurance company. But this is so scroll up. I just want to see what the number is here.
I think it's
worker contract. Go to the end. Go to 2025.
It looks like it's $7,000.
Yeah,
$6,850. So that comes out to about $550 a month for healthcare. It's interesting.
I mean, you know what? A point someone made, who's really smart and in media, is that a lot of these issues are just so picky. Like there are affordable houses in decent places across the country. And yes, there may not be great jobs in some of these regions. like Central Florida or even parts of Florida or even Northern California or so many of the places we visited in the Rust Belt. But there are a lot of remote I think there are two things at once. Yes, it's getting harder to buy essential goods. I also think it's a good point that people are just picky now. Like you hear stories about how a lot of people back in the day got started. And this isn't just cherry pick from famous people's biographies. This is your dad, your aunt, your uncle, their expectations about work-life balance and this and that. And it is just so in worker safety and all this.
Totally.
I mean, like people have gotten softer and I've heard people talk about like, oh, but I want to stay in New York. Oh, but I want to be back at 5 p.m. Oh, but I want a good paying job. Oh, I want to be in this. And, I don't want to sound like a boomer, Dave Ramsey. I think it's objectively true. If you want to zoom out to that, it's the maxim of, hard times create good men create good times create weak men create hard times. And I think there's truth to that. I think we're in a weak person phase.
I agree. I mean, that's why if you talk to immigrants anywhere, I mean, their concerns are so much different than ours. I mean, the juxtaposition, we saw this in Canada we see this all over America, but in Canada it was so stark. The people say, oh, there's no work, there's this and that, blah, 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 the homelessness, the drug addiction. And then simultaneously, literally on the same block, you've got a bunch of immigrants who are like, hey, I don't get it. I'm working my ass off. Things are good. Just one thing, I just got to call this out because this pisses me off. Sagar and Jetty, I got the tweet in front of me here. The average cost of a family health insurance plan is now $27,000 plus a $2,000 deductible, but I'm supposed to care about some early retirees premiums going up. This is misleading. This is 52,000 views, so I guess it's not that much. But this is so misleading. Yes, the average cost of family health insurance plan is now $27,000. But if you see this on Twitter, on X, you would think that's what the average family is paying.
That's literally what happened to me.
but I mean, this is his job. This is his job to not put out misleading stuff, right? You're going to be, I'm the leading journalist of this and that. Dude, this is it's like your audience is getting misinformed when you put out this stuff. I mean,
and for us, for context, how much is the average family actually contributing, or average worker?
What was the number we just said?
6850.
6850.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in reality, you're
4xing the actual figure. And again, I'm not here to defend, the health industry, which is an absolute disaster. But the fact is, I mean, if it were 27,000, then we would be in an utter crisis. Everybody would, then we truly wouldn't have a middle class. 7,000 makes sense to me in terms of if you break down the stats that you said, Rob, 7,000 makes sense in that context because it's like, okay, yeah. So I'm, say someone's earning $70,000 and, 7,000 of that has to go to that. And they got to save up for college and retirement. And there's another 15,000. They got to pay the mortgage, 30,000. And you end up with very little money left over, but you still have some, you think about the middle class American, they're not living paycheck to paycheck necessarily, but if they want to buy a car, it's extremely difficult. If they want to take a nice vacation with their family, it's very costly. If stuff like this, that makes sense. 27,000 to me would be, whatever it is. Let's see. What's percent of Americans who can't afford $1,000 emergency expense?
It's a lot.
It is a lot. But I'm just like, there's a lot of this. Okay, I'll give you.
I'm always curious about that. What that stat means. Does that mean that 63% of Americans literally don't have $500 in their bank account?
See, the numbers get schizophrenic here because let's look up the number of people who are like sports betting, right? Let's look up the number of people who take a vacation. Like, so you end up with a much more complicated picture. Yeah.
I'm just calling bullshit on that. I know people say, well, you've been exposed as out of touch. We're pretty in touch. We live in the numbers. We travel the country. We've lived in bad places.
Dude, I will give you a great, just an eye-opening thing at all that I realized recently. Detroit, right? Detroit, synonymous with the decline. We've been there. We've made the video about it. The whole thing. Okay, dude, Detroit metro area, the population has been continuing to climb. If you look, there's not even a dip in Detroit metro area population. So what does that say? It says that the decline in Detroit is not necessarily representative of the whole area. Now, the decline in Detroit is very real. To me, it's a tragedy what happened to the city and everything there. It upsets me to be there, to look at what it was, look how great of a city it was, to look at how much work they had and all this and that. Yet there's a whole nother story here, which is to say all those people moved out to the suburbs, right? If you go to the suburbs, you don't have a bunch of decaying and abandoned buildings, right? It's just in the city proper. It's the same in Gary, Indiana. It's even the same thing. The moment you step foot outside of Gary into the next county, it's actually nice. You gotta, it's totally different, which just goes to show what's happened. You've had the costs go up and you've had all this stuff happen. I'm not saying things have gotten better. I think things have, generally speaking, for the average American, gotten much worse. That being said, a lot of these statistics you see about it don't only say part of the picture. I think some of it gets back to what you said. If things were that much harder, you would start to see a decline, I think, maybe in immigrants coming here. And instead we have the opposite because people still come here because they still feel there's upward mobility. The question is it getting harder to be upwardly mobile? And I think that the answer is yes, because once upon a time, it didn't matter what language you spoke. You go work in the factory, you had a guaranteed middle-class job for life and so on. But
I'm just, Robert, you seeing any, I by the way, I totally agree with all that. I'm just still caught up on that 63% number. Cause as you point out, how can that be?
It varies wildly.
I'm seeing some people say 37%. So I imagine a lot of this is semantics. That is just not, there's no way that's true. The average household salary is too high in America. Isn't it like 70K or something? Average household, 80K?
83 is the median.
83. I mean, if you think about that, there's just no way. Yeah. So I that's something that we could look into.
Hold on, I'm curious. We should do, first of all, we should look into this right now. Okay. So you say 83, keep in mind that's household income.
Yes.
So that's for a family of 3 or 4.
And that's
Median. So, okay. Like let's say that it's something here. It's the bottom 24% of Americans can't afford. They have no savings. That I totally believe.
Okay.
You think about the bottom 24%.
Yeah. Totally.
Like these are people who do not have the money for this kind of stuff. When you get the 63rd percentile, that's where I start to be a little bit like. But then again, like people have a lot of liabilities. I think the thing about the income, this is the issue with debt, right? This is where you get into the healthcare debt, student debt, car debt, you name it, housing debt. I mean. So people end up they can't afford it because even when they have excess money, right? Even when they're saving a couple $1,000s a month, and say you're saving $2,000 a month, but you've got $1,500 a month in debt payments. You're actually only saving $500, and then it's like, oh shit, I owe $1,000 because I hit a pothole. Then that's where the issue.
Well, I was gonna say I don't doubt. I mean, like the credit card debt numbers don't lie. I mean, like they are severe, and we don't want to drag on the show. This feels like a good thing to pick up on once we've done a little more research.
Credit card debt numbers. There was an interesting thing in the economic trend though with that. I wrote an article about this a couple months ago, and it was the people who have the most credit card debt are the highest earners.
That's what I'm thinking. Like if this is people who, I mean, is this 63% people who truly couldn't afford, a car? Like damage fee tomorrow. That's probably the worst way of saying it. But like,
sorry.
Yes, go.
I had that backwards. What it is, Rob? It's Americans it's upper middle class Americans, I believe, are the ones who tend to have the most credit card debt. The reason being, if you're poor, you either can't have a credit card or your spending limit's so low that's not an issue. If you're rich, you have enough money to pay it off every month. It's a very specific band that shoulders almost all of this. And this is how it is with a lot of this kind of stuff. It's the same exact thing with healthcare costs. When they talk about the lack of health insurance in America, if you actually dig into it, it's not the poorest people who are generally the most burdened by healthcare costs. It's the people who are a bit above the poverty line, but not wealthy enough to have a bunch of additional cash. It's the same thing with these emergency expenses, right? You think about some probably in that median range, maybe a little bit below, but say someone who's making, say someone who's living alone and making 40 grand a year, right?
Totally.
Like that would be essentially the median. Like say if you say two income household, that'd be 80K. So say someone's making 40K and they're, whatever. They end up financing more stuff with credit card. They end up indebted. You are on the one hand, maybe you don't get good healthcare from your business. If you're making that much, you might not have the best benefits, right? On the other hand, you're not, you're making too much to qualify for like Medicaid or Obamacare. So you end up in this band between having good private healthcare, but above having good, heavily subsidized healthcare, and that's who really gets screwed. And it's the same thing with colleges. But colleges is a little bit higher, where if you're making around like 80 to 100K household income, then you're really in trouble because you may not qualify for the school's aid, but you're also not going to qualify for federal aid, and then you end up facing the biggest burden.
I wish the stat I want to hear is like, basically, if you had an emergency, whether it's healthcare, whether it's a car accident, whether it's anything, what percentage of Americans couldn't pay off? No, Rob, go back to that chart if you could. Let's pull this up. We'll end with this here, folks. But it's basically showing income percentile in the country, and it's showing the median and averaging credit card debt.
From sponsor Motley Fool, by the way.
From shout out Motley Fool. So you have people who have credit card debt in the upper decile in America, 25% of people, and that's a group that's making $390K on median. So the average would be even higher. So I guess I like have such a desire to look into this because I'm calling bullshit on that. I'm sorry.
The 63%.
Yeah, the 63%, or at least it's misleading. Maybe there is something to it. But that just doesn't line up with what anyways, I mean, maybe we do live in a bubble. I don't know. But let me just put it this way. If you're going to brunch and getting a little boo-boo and you got NFL Red Zone on Sunday and you're betting on I don't have sympathy.
What share of Americans are gambling?
It's a great question.
I'm a big Gary Vee guy, and he's always been saying like a lot of this is just keeping up with the Joneses. People buying stuff they can't afford because they want to maintain a middle class lifestyle.
I buy that. I totally buy that.
55% of all American adults participated in some form of gambling in the past year. This is according to the American Gaming Association.
So basically, there would be
22% of adults have sports bet in the last year.
So, all right, not a ton of sympathy. Okay, this feels like a great pause point. I think we got to pick up some of this tomorrow. We'll also cover the news. And by the way, if you're still here, thank you so much for watching. We've covered a lot of ground. The few, the proud who's ever made it this far. But really, really fun episode. And any final messages for us?
No, just thank you for watching and smash that subscribe button. We will be back tomorrow.
Awesome. All right.